Donc, j'ouvre maintenant la séance.
I call this meeting to order a little bit late due to technical issues. Welcome to meeting number 49 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. Pursuant to the order of reference of Monday, May 30th, 2022, the committee resumes its consideration of Bill C-13, an act to amend the Official Languages Act to enact the use of French in federally regulated private businesses act and to make related amendments to other acts. As per our routine motion, I would like to inform the committee that all members have completed the required login tests prior to the meeting. Today, we are resuming our clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-13. I would like to welcome our officials from the departments from Canadian Heritage and the Treasury Board, the Department of Justice and the Treasury Board Secretariat. They are here to support the committee with answers to technical questions. So from Canadian Heritage, Julie Boyer, Marcel Fallu, and Chantal Terrien. From the Treasury Board Secretariat, Carson Quell. And from the Department of Justice, Mr. Newman. Welcome again. We are resuming our clause-by-clause consideration with our Clause 11. We were at an amendment to Clause 11. So I would like to start this meeting by asking if the amended Clause 11 is carried. We will move to a vote. Madam Clerk.
Monsieur Seri?
Oh, excusez-moi, on parle bien de tout l'article parce qu'on a...
We are talking of the whole clause with all of the amendments that have been approved so far. So now we're voting on Clause 11 as amended.
La greffière.
Mr. Chair, we don't usually vote for the whole clause. Well, what if it's not unanimous? This is what Monsieur Beaulieu was saying. I missed that. My apologies.
Si ça ne fonctionne pas, M. Iacono, peut-être faire signe du pouce pour ou contre?
Pour. Pour.
OK, nous éprouvons un problème technique de ce côté-ci de la Chambre tout de suite. Je dois suspendre momentanément et ça se passe de ce côté-ci, là. Un instant.
We are having technical issues.
Nous reprenons la séance. Désolé pour...
We will resume. Sorry for the people who are here with us and the people who are watching at home. We have technical problems here in the room, so we were moving to a vote on the amended Clause 11. Yes, Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, we have to remind ourselves that the party in power has limited our debate to 8 meetings. Will we consider the lost time that we've experienced this morning and at other meetings? Will this be added? At a minimum, we need to have at least these 8 full meetings in terms of time. First of all, I don't want to call you to order, Mr. Vice Chair, but the 8 sessions was carried unanimously. It wasn't a government decision. Also, I've checked with the team around us that it could be possible. We'll have to agree on the time to be added at the end. We could extend today's meeting. It's not possible for me. I have other committees I have to leave at a quarter to on the button, but we could talk about this outside of this meeting so that we could move forward today and then reach an agreement on how we can resume with this lost time.
La prolonger.
Do you want to make one session longer, for example? But we'll talk about this afterwards. But I would assume that people would like to replace this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you are correct. Now, I had a hard time saying yes, though, to this decision. As a chair, I can't necessarily tell how sensitive others are, but yes, I assumed that maybe some political parties were more in favor of the decision. So we're going to go back to our vote. Article 11's amendment as modified.
Oui.
Monsieur Drouin.
Pour.
Monsieur Iacono.
En faveur.
Madame Kaya-Baga.
Pour.
Monsieur Sanson.
Oui.
Monsieur Godin.
Contre.
Monsieur Gourde. Contre. Monsieur Généreux.
Contre.
Monsieur Lehoux. Contre. Monsieur Beaulieu.
Contre.
Et Madame Ashton.
Pour.
Donc, 6 pour, 5 contre.
6-4. So the amendment is passed. So section 11, clause 11 rather, page 34 of your document. So amendment BQ8. Mr. Beaulieu, will you be moving this motion? Yes. So I'd like you to bring your attention to the editing differences between the English and French in BQ8. So the legal advisor has stated that the amendments are the equivalent of one another in French and English, and so if it is amended, we will stick to what we have written here. So our analyst has verified this. Mr. Beaulieu? Inaudible? Page 7, lines up to line 27. If we replace if the interpreter does not have the text. So the goal of this amendment is that Francophone citizens have access to the legal system and the jurisprudence for all topics that may be in French. Any questions on BQ8? I don't see anyone. So, Madam Clerk, we can proceed to a vote.
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin,
Contre.
Monsieur Iacono,
Contre.
Madame Kayabaga,
Contre.
Monsieur Sanson,
Contre.
Monsieur Godin,
Pour.
Monsieur Gourde, Monsieur Généreux,
Pour.
Monsieur Lehoux, Monsieur Beaulieu,
Pour.
Madame Ashton.
Contre.
Donc, 6 contre.
So 6 against 5, 4. So the amendment is defeated. If you could explain your amendment, because we received some emails from individuals who are listening to us online and don't necessarily have this document, and so it would be appreciated if we could read the amendment as it is. So we have the document, but there are listeners who have requested us to read this out. So now we are going to move on to Clause 12. Is Clause 12 passed? Should we proceed to a vote? I see unanimous consent, so Clause 12 is carried. Can you repeat your request, please? The Amendment BQ8 was an amendment to Clause 12 and was defeated. We have no other amendments concerning Clause 12. 12.1 is not in Clause 12? Okay. It's like the 10.1 from the other day. Okay, we'll start again. I was speaking to Mr. Beaulieu, who is sharing something with me. He agrees with the amendment, but we'll move to a vote to make sure it's clear. Okay, Madam Clerk, for Clause 12.
Pour.
Monsieur Drouin,
Pour.
Monsieur Iacono,
En faveur.
Madame Kayabaga,
En faveur.
Monsieur Sanson,
Pour.
Monsieur Godin,
Contre.
Monsieur Gourde, Monsieur Généreux,
Contre.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Contre.
Monsieur Beaulieu et Madame Ashton.
Pour.
Donc, 6 pour.
6 for, 5 against. Our Clause 12 is carried. Mr. Godin, now Clause 12.1, CPC 11. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Considering the fact that we've listened to different speakers and we want to represent all organizations, I want to mention that this amendment was suggested by the Commissioner of Official Languages. That Bill C-13 be amended by adding, after line 12 on page 8, the following clause. Subsection 23(1) of the Act is replaced by the following. For greater certainty, in addition to the duty set out in Section 22, every federal institution that provides services or makes them available to the traveling public has the duty to ensure that any member of the traveling public can communicate and obtain those services in either official language from any office or facility of the institution in Canada or elsewhere where there is significant demand for those services in that language. I think that this amendment is pretty clear. We want to make sure that Canadians have access to services in both official languages. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to move a sub-amendment. If we look at the goal of the amendment, I think it is a good thing, but I think we need to be more specific to make it coherent. Because I think it could lead to confusion with the two goals. I've asked the clerk to share the sub-amendment, and so copies of this have been distributed. So this is a small change if we take clause 23.1 and we remove a section of this. So remove in addition to the duty set out in section 22 and add under section 22 later in the paragraph. The goal here is that we don't want there to be any confusion with section 22. Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Beaulieu? I think that there is a difference between having this obligation or not. The goal of the previous amendment is that we are strengthening provision of service in French for all Canadians. So I think that our main goal should be supporting francophones outside of Quebec. Mr. Gaudin? Mr. Chair? I appreciate what has been said about the modification of our suggested amendment. I think that if we want this bill to have more teeth to it, well, personally, I would prefer to keep the word obligation. So unfortunately, I cannot support the amendment of my colleague. Anyone else on this sub-amendment moved by Mr. Serret? I don't see anyone. We will now vote. Ms. Clerk?
Pour.
Monsieur Drouin,
Pour.
Monsieur Iacono,
Pour.
Madame Kayabaga,
Pour.
Monsieur Sanson,
Pour.
Monsieur Godin,
Contre.
Monsieur Gourde, Monsieur Généreux,
Contre.
Monsieur Lehoux, Monsieur Beaulieu,
Contre.
Madame Ashton.
Contre.
6 contre, 5
6 against, 5 for. So this sub-amendment to CPC 11 has been defeated, and we're going back, therefore, to CPC 11. Madam Clerk?
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin,
contre.
Monsieur Iacono,
Contre.
Madame Kayabaga,
Contre.
Monsieur Sanson,
Contre.
Monsieur Godin,
Greffière, je vais appuyer mon amendement.
Madam Clerk, I will be supporting my amendment.
Monsieur Généreux,
Pour.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Pour.
Monsieur Beaulieu, Madame Ashton.
Pour.
Donc, 6 pour,
6 in favor, 5 against, so CPC 11 is carried. Now, page 36, BQ 9. Mr. Beaulieu? Yes, so in the same spirit of as the amendment we just voted on, so a new 24, clause 24.1. Every federal institution has the duty to ensure that any member of the public can communicate in either official language with and obtain any available services in either official language from any of its offices or facilities in Canada or elsewhere. So I don't want this to be conditional in terms of the size of the Francophone population. Oftentimes, there is a large proportion of Francophones outside of Quebec who do not have access to services in French. And as the proportion of Francophones outside of Quebec diminishes, fewer Francophone services are available. And so I think that this should be without any conditions. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Any questions? Mr. Serret? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask a question to Ms. Boyer or other members of the team. In these over 200 offices throughout the country, as well as if we look at Indigenous communities, if we look at the north of Quebec, unilingual Anglophones. With this sub-amendment, are we requesting that those who speak, for example, only English be bilingual? So this would apply to Quebec and the entire country. Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Serré. This sub-amendment suggests that all federal offices be bilingual. So in Quebec, those who only speak French would now have to offer services in both official languages. And it is stated that these services should be offered where there is real demand. So we would have to offer bilingual services in all places, including Alberta, for example. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. As my colleague has stated, the Charter has laid out the conditions for offering services in both languages. So when the location of the office means that it should be bilingual. There's also the condition of real demand. If we often speak of the 5%. So if to decide whether or not an office needs to offer services in both languages, we look for about 5% of the population being of the minority language. Then the office needs to be bilingual. But now we have broadened the number of people who would be likely to request service in a minority official language. We've also added minority language schools. So when there is a federal office near one of these minority language schools, then bilingual service must be offered. But say we were to want to make all post offices bilingual. What does this mean in tangible terms? Say in Quebec there are 1,300 unilingual offices that would then become bilingual. The consequence is that, well, we would be offering a service there where there is no real demand for it. So we'd be offering a service knowing that very few people would be using the service. The second consequence is that those who only speak one language would have less of a chance to be employed in one of these offices. Because for an office to be bilingual, you need bilingual personnel. So the Canadian bilingual system is based upon having that demand for the minority language. The goal is not to offer a service where there is no demand for it. Mr. Gaudin? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is very interesting. I have a very practical question. I'm a Canadian citizen in a sector where offices are unilingual. Now, I'm a francophone. Say I go ask a question and I require a service. What happens? Considering I'm francophone, Mr. Chair, we will refer you to the closest office that offers bilingual service. And remember that all online services, for example, video calls, are offered in both official languages. So we will make sure that the person is getting access to the necessary service. Mr. Chair, earlier you said that unilingual offices, if we apply this clause to it, would require all personnel to be bilingual. Is that what you stated?
Let me be specific. The offices need to be able to offer bilingual services at all times. This means that in offices where there are very few employees, we have to plan for having bilingual staff, a high percentage. So you say a high percentage. So if one goes into this unilingual office, English unilingual office, and a Francophone resident asks for service in French, rather than expecting all employees to be bilingual, would it be necessary to, should we instead require that managers be Francophone or bilingual? Mr. Chair, at the counter, we need to be able to offer quality service in both languages. Service needs to be offered in both languages. It's not just the bosses. Yes, but you said earlier that if I go into an office that's unilingual and that there are no Francophones, you'll refer me to another office. I'll have to go somewhere else. Indeed. So in a post office, we can tell you where, for example, in larger areas, there are always post offices that offer services in both languages. You can go to one of those post offices. But per the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, do you not have an obligation towards your citizens that says that all citizens can have access to services in the official language of their choice? Mr. Chair, what's in the Charter is the concept, and it includes the concept of high demand. So offices need to measure potential demand in their service area. This is done with data from Statistics Canada. We look at the absolute number of the linguistic minority in the minority area, including the percentage. Then we establish whether or not it is necessary to have a bilingual office. Mr. Beaulieu. Inaudible, the microphone is not on. Not only are bilingual services offered everywhere? You know, the vice president of the union said that English is the common language, and the majority of positions in the federal public service in Quebec requires English. So this would be about the outside of Quebec. It would be very difficult to find one place where there isn't at least one person that can provide service in another language. Outside of Quebec, this would be highly problematic. There are many areas where there are no services in French. We've been told by a large number of witnesses. Mr. Généreux, you know, I live in a village that has 1,000 residents. 3/4 of the municipalities in my area have fewer than 500 people. So post offices in those areas don't have bilingual staff. That's certain. You might tell me that I'm in the most Francophone county in Canada, so we don't need bilingual staff. But if we carried this amendment, throughout Canada, in every office of Canada Post, we would have to have a bilingual staff, even if there's no demand. Is that what you're saying? Yes. Mr. Chair, this is correct. Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Seri. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to say. If I understand correctly, what is mentioned here is that if a Francophone who is a unilingual and a Francophone in Quebec will lose their job here because they're not bilingual, if they don't speak English, what happens to a Francophone in Quebec that doesn't speak English? Will they lose their job? A little order, please. Ms. Ashton. Ms. Ashton, please wait. Mr. Beaulieu, I'll give you the floor. Please go ahead. I think that my colleagues have good arguments. I will withdraw my amendment. You need unanimous consent to withdraw an amendment. Do we have unanimous consent? You know, only fools never change their mind. Do we have unanimous consent to withdraw BQ9? No objections. We are withdrawing BQ9. This brings us to page 37 of the amendments package. CPC 12. Mr. Godin, you have the floor. You know, in the past, we've heard from the Federation of Francophones of British Columbia, and this amendment, Mr. Chair, to meet your request earlier and to help people at home understand what's going on. I'll give you more context later, but CPC 12 seeks to add after line 12 of page 8 the following clause. Section 25 of the Act is renumbered as subsection 25(1) and amended by adding the following: for the purpose of the subsection 1, the other person or organization is deemed to provide, make available services on behalf of the federal institution. If the federal institution exercises control over the person or organization, the other person or organization implements a policy, program, or legislative regime which the federal institution is responsible. 3, a province or territory that is acting under the agreement, the Government of Canada that provides for the payment, the amount of the province or territory is deemed to make available services on behalf of a federal institution. And so here it's a matter of funding. As I said earlier, at the Conservative Party, we are listening to organizations. We heard from the FCFA and also the FFCB, and I think it would be important to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any questions? Mr. Seri, yes. Mr. Chair, I would like to ask for the opinions of the officials. In paragraph 3, here, if I understand correctly, what it says is that the federal government would overstep on provincial jurisdiction. So I wanted to get some clarification. Is paragraph 3 even admissible in this bill? So that's my first question, and then we can go from there if there are more questions. So you're talking about paragraph 3? Yes, paragraph 3. Mr. Newman. I won't speak to whether it is admissible, but I can give some observations. This clause would generate a binding agreement with the province, a funding agreement to provide funds to a province. This paragraph would make the province a servant of the province. This is not the case as per the law. The provincial government doesn't work for the federal government, so it would be about providing funds. If there was an agreement between the province and or territory and the federal government, the province could administer the services as it sees fit. So providing funds and making the province responsible for the respect of the Official Languages Act, it's not necessarily inadmissible, or it doesn't necessarily go against federal provincial jurisdiction, but it goes further than what recognized jurisprudence has done in the past. There's Lavigne again v. Canada in 2022. There are others. So this would go further than what we normally do, and it would make the province a proxy or agent of the federal government, and you would require a funding agreement. There could be incidences on how this is done and how the province exercises its own mandate. Ms. Ashton first, and then Mr. Godin. The interpreter regrets, but sound quality coming from the current speaker is not sufficient for interpretation to be provided. Service will resume as soon as the sound quality allows it.
Et je pense qu'on vient de l'envoyer à la greffière pour le partager. Alors, en premier, je veux reconnaître le travail qui a été fait par la francophonie en Colombie-Britannique, une communauté marginalisée qui s'est battue jusqu'à la Cour suprême pour protéger leurs droits. On croit que c'est absolument essentiel qu'on les soutienne et en reconnaissant évidemment que il faut éviter des situations qui, en fait, présenteront des obstacles de l'autre côté pour les communautés à travers le pays. Alors, ce étant dit, on propose un sous-amendement qui élimine le paragraphe 3. On change certains mots dans le paragraphe A. On élimine le mot politique dans le paragraphe B et on ajoute un nouveau sous-paragraphe 3 qui est une précision pour répondre aux inquiétudes qu'on a entendues.
Madame Ashton, je pense que le document est bien.
Ms. Ashton, I believe the document was just received. We'll have it circulated and we will suspend. Mr. Godin, please go ahead. Mr. Chair, while the sub-amendment is distributed, I agree with her, but I do have a question for Mr. Newman. We often speak of the case of British Columbia. I'm not a lawyer. Can you possibly suggest wording or a way to proceed that this kind of situation is no longer repeated, the kind of situation that we saw in British Columbia, the fight between the federal government and the province, and who paid the price was the Francophones in that province. I am not a legislative clerk either. I'm a lawyer. I often work with legislative clerks. They have solutions for text. They are usually able to state things in a way that makes sense for jurisprudence, but perhaps let's see what's being proposed by Ms. Ashton. Okay, I think everyone has received or is receiving the amendment. I'm looking for it myself. On CPC 12. The chair, I have not received it. Am I on the senders list?
Sur le sous-amendement,
On the sub-amendment by Ms. Ashton, are there any questions? You need more time? Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, we will suspend for the time required to take it all in.
Non,
So we will resume on the sub-amendment proposed by Ms. Ashton. Are there any questions on the sub-amendment online, around the table? Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair. I'm struggling. Please be patient. It's number 3 that's being replaced by... We've understood that the federal government is not enough to... I think that the federal government has an obligation to always communicate in both official language. So if there's some sort of funding, the communication has to be bilingual. I'm not comfortable. I understand. I don't want to restrict daily operations, but on the other hand, I have a difficulty accepting that we could say that for greater certainty, a mere financial contribution by the government, this isn't clear, especially for organizations in minority situations. I'm not comfortable with this. I can't tell you as chair, but what Mr. Newman was saying is that the transfers between federal and provincial and territorial governments, for example, health transfers, by leaving your third paragraph, the transfers would make it so that, no, I understand. But, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to rewrite it this morning, but my position is that perhaps I'm asking too much, but Ms. Ashton isn't asking for enough. Are there any other questions? We will vote on the sub-amendment. I see no other questions online or in the room. Shall we move to a vote? Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Monsieur Serré,
Pour.
Monsieur Drouin,
pour.
Monsieur Iacono,
Pour.
Madame Kayabaga,
Pour.
Monsieur Sanson,
Pour.
Monsieur Godin,
Je vais me rallier, Monsieur le Président. Et...
I will vote in favor, Mr. Chair.
Pour.
Monsieur Généreux,
Pour.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Pour.
Monsieur Beaulieu,
Pour.
Madame Ashton.
Pour.
Bon, ça c'est du beau travail.
Excellent work. Unanimously carried. This brings us to the main amendment, CPC 12, as amendment. Yes, Mr. Serré? Mr. Chair, I would like to ask for some clarification or respond to Mr. Godin's concerns. Perhaps Ms. Boyer or the Treasury Board Secretary can make some clarifications as to the adoption of the sub-amendment and to see what that would do. Can we perhaps allay these concerns?
Newman pour.
So I'll give the floor to Mr. Newman now to explain this amendment and what it does, the amendment that was just carried. So the initial amendment gives us a better idea of how the implementation of this obligation will go. The services that are offered on behalf of the federal government need to be offered in both official languages. So this gives us some structure and states that financial contribution, funding from the federal government is not enough. And we consider that the amendment, as modified, respects the criteria shared by the Supreme Court of Canada in the Caldyke case and the jurisprudence in terms of proxies. I see no hands raised, so voting on CPC 12 as modified.
Monsieur Drouin,
Pour.
Monsieur Iacono,
Pour.
Madame Kayabaga,
Pour.
Monsieur Sanson,
D'accord.
Monsieur Godin,
Pour.
Monsieur Gourde,
Pour.
Monsieur Généreux, Monsieur Lehoux,
Pour.
Monsieur Beaulieu, Madame Ashton.
Pour.
Donc, travail d'équipe, CPC 12.
CPC 12 as modified, unanimously adopted. So CPC 13 now. Page 38, Mr. Godin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. CPC 13 is on clause 12.1. The Act is amended by adding the following after Section 31.1. The provisions of this part shall be implemented while taking into account the commitment to protect and promote the French language. So, in other words, Part 4 needs to respect Part 7. So that's my presentation of CPC 13. Would anyone like to add something in the room or online? Mr. Serret? Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are speaking of Part 4 and minority languages, like my colleague stated. So I want to talk about repeating general statements that are already found in the bill. So we speak of the protection and promotion of French in some parts of the bill, but not necessarily in others. Now, I'm not a legislative clerk or a lawyer, but I'm wondering if that could cause issues in the interpretation of this bill in the courts. Could anyone comment on this? Yes, of course. So, as you said, Mr. Serret, we're taking what was already mentioned in the preamble and in the interpretation clause in C13 that have already been passed, and taking into account the specific situation of Quebec and the French language. And the bill states that we will take into account the commitment to protect and promote the French language. So could this have an effect on the application of the enforcement, rather, of this bill? Well, my colleague will add to this. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to my colleague. I would just add that we always have to keep in mind that Section 4, like Section 5 and 3, Section 4 speaks of Section 20 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So real equality in service provision in both official languages. So we already have the interpretation of this, and now we are modifying it, what Mr. Beaulieu has suggested. And so we have a series of interpretation principles for the overall interpretation of the bill. So Section 4 is being implemented. We're on the practical step, how to make the public's right to bilingual services real and implemented. So we don't see the usefulness of other interpretation provisions in this section because, as I've said, this is already in other sections of the bill. Thank you. Would anyone else like to add something? Mr. Beaulieu, you wanted to add something? No? Okay. Mr. Godin? Mr. Chair, I'm going to repeat what I've often said. I understand what you're saying. but I think in any case we should just vote. So we'll move on to a vote now.
Monsieur Seri.
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin.
Contre.
Monsieur Iacono.
Contre.
Madame Kayabaga.
Contre.
Monsieur Sanson.
Pas en faveur.
Monsieur Godin.
Pour.
Monsieur Gourde.
Pour.
Monsieur Généreux.
Pour.
Monsieur Lehoux.
Pour.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Pour.
Madame Ashton.
Contre.
Donc, 6 contre, 5 pour. L'amendement CPC.
So 6 against, 5 in favor. Now we'll move on to page 39, BQ 10. Mr. Beaulieu, the floor is yours. The act is amended by adding the following after section 31. So we're on page 8. The interpreter did not have the text. So we're removing point D for those who are traveling. The goal of this amendment is to ensure that French language services are available in federal institutions, Canadian federal institutions situated abroad. So the goal is that Francophones who go abroad and would like to access services from Canadian federal offices be able to do so in French without any language obstacles. Would anyone like to add anything? Madam Clerk, on to a vote.
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin.
Contre.
Monsieur Iacono.
Contre.
Madame Kayabaga.
Contre.
Monsieur Sanson.
Contre.
Monsieur Godin.
Contre.
Monsieur Gourde.
Contre.
Monsieur Généreux.
Contre.
Monsieur Lehoux.
Contre.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Pour.
Madame Ashton.
Contre.
Donc, 10 contre, 1 pour. BQ 10 est rejeté.
So 10 against and 1 in favor. The amendment is defeated. Mr. Beaulieu. So BQ 11. The goal is to ensure the access to Francophone services in federal offices that are situated abroad. Any comments? Proceeding to vote.
Après ça, attends. C'est un vote vite.
OK. Monsieur Seri.
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin.
Contre.
Monsieur Iacono.
Contre.
Madame Kayabaga.
Contre.
Monsieur Sanson.
Je ne peux appuyer.
Monsieur Godin.
Contre.
Monsieur Gourde.
Contre.
Monsieur Généreux.
Contre.
Monsieur Lehoux.
Contre.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Pour.
Madame Ashton.
Contre.
Non. 1, 2, 3.
J'ai peut-être mal pris le compte.
We may have miscounted. No, I have 10. Okay, everyone voted, so 10 to 1. So BQ 11 is defeated. Now CPC 14. Before we get to this, Mr. Gaudin, if CPC 14 is carried, BQ 12 cannot be carried as well because it is identical. Mr. Gaudin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Trying to keep up because we're moving quickly. But I want to do a good job. Sorry for the delay. CPC 14, clause 12.1, paragraph 32 of the Act is replaced by the following. Any other factors that the Governor and Council considers appropriate, including the minority situation of the French language in Canada due to the predominant use of English and the linguistic specificity of Quebec? Mr. Chair, this is so that throughout the bill, there is the reminder that Quebec has its own linguistic specificity. And that's the reason why I am suggesting this amendment. Mr. Serret, you're first. Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like our experts to clarify something for me if possible. If I've understood, what's suggested here only applies to Quebec and nowhere else. So what are the effects of that? Could you comment on this? Thank you, Mr. Serret. This is a part of the law where we're defining the criteria for regulations and for the Governor and Council. So we're adding criteria that would be important to take into account for the French language, given that English is given this specific situation of Quebec. So this reinforces our goal. Mr. Newman, would you like to add something? We don't think that the interpretation clause, amongst other clauses early on in the bill, offer enough consideration of this issue. We don't want to stray too far from our goal of substantive equality between French and English. As I said earlier, Section 4 aims for the tangible implementation of these services. So how are we going to deliver services in French and English? It's not a question of interpretation criteria. The interpretation criteria is not necessarily going to be used for its implementation. The Governor and Council can take into account the specific situation of the linguistic minority community. So we don't see how this type of provision would necessarily help the Governor and Council be more precise with the service delivery in French and English. Mr. Beaulieu and then Mr. Gaudin. I think it's important to add that in reality what happens is things are usually in English, whereas, this is a suggestion from the government of Quebec that wasn't accepted. The goal is that French be more dominant in order to strengthen French, which is in decline and is a minority language in Canada and in North America. Mr. Gaudin? Mr. Chair, I'd like Mr. Newman, if possible, to share the negative effects of this clause on the bill. If you could add your comments on the negative impact of this wording in the bill. According to what we have laid out, this is specific mention to the French language and the linguistic specificity of Quebec, whereas in Section 4, we state the constitutional obligation from Section 20 of the Charter. And in Section 20 of the Charter, it states that, first of all, the public has the right to receive services and to communicate with federal offices in their language in accordance to the criteria of Section 20. When there is significant demand or the purpose of the office ensures that this is necessary. So we're speaking of the province of Quebec. In this context, since we already have the interpretation principles for real and substantive equality, we don't see how this would support the effective implementation of Section 4, since this is already stated in Section 4 of the Charter. Mr. Beaulieu, when you speak of substantive equality, are we speaking of access to services or the equality in the status of French? Ms. Boyer may be able to give you some more clarification on that, but substantive equality is in terms of access to services, but Section 4 speaks of access in tangible terms. There's also the equality of status, and oftentimes this requires formal equality in terms of passing laws, for example. We need a certain formality to all of this sometimes. So formal equality doesn't necessarily take away from substantive equality in terms of status. Mr. Beaulieu? So essentially, if we state that we want to maintain the demographic weight of French in Quebec, is that in line with the goal of substantive equality? I would say that substantive equality can take into account this goal of maintaining the demographic weight of French outside of Quebec. So this will have an impact on services. Would you like to add something, Mr. Quill? So I'd like to give an example that could illustrate this. So we're starting with the basis of equal treatment for minority linguistic communities. There's a regulation that states that if there is a federal office close to a minority language school, then this office needs to offer services in both official languages. This leads to the question, is a minority language English school, would there be fewer federal bilingual services near these schools than for a minority language francophone school? That's something to take into account if we carry this provision.
Thank you, Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, I would like to comment on the answer, and I will come back with something else. I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. It happens to me. I think it happens to all of us. Mr. Newman, I asked you a question earlier. I asked what the negative impact this amendment could have. You know what? Hold my question. I just remembered what I wanted to ask originally. Okay, so, Mr. Quell, you're saying this is another criteria. This is one part of many. It's something we want people to keep in mind. This situation that is a reality, substantive or real equality. We have to remind people of this. That's why we have to put it in the Act. That's why I don't agree with your comment. So, Mr. Newman, I would like to ask you my question again. What is the negative impact if point C is added to the Act? Are there negative consequences? I don't think it's really up to me to answer this question beyond the legal aspect that I already highlighted. So Clause 20 of the Charter speaks to service provision and communication and the ability to communicate in English in French. The entire Part 4 focuses on the implementation of this right, both for Anglophones and Francophones, and for minority and majority communities. This might not be a question of whether or not it is harmful, but if it is relevant to Part 4. I see no one else. Let's move to a vote. Madam Clerk, on CPC 14.
Ferry,
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin,
Contre.
Monsieur Iacono,
Contre.
Madame Kayabaga,
Contre.
Monsieur Sanson,
Contre.
Monsieur Godin,
Pour.
Monsieur Gourde, Monsieur Généreux,
Pour.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Pour.
Monsieur Beaulieu,
Pour.
Madame Ashton.
Contre.
Donc, 6 contre,
6 yeas, 6 nays, 5 yeas. That is defeated. So this invalidates BQ 12, as I mentioned earlier. So this brings us to, one moment, please. This brings us to Clause 13. And the first amendment is BQ 13. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor. You're not going to present it? Okay. We are withdrawing it. Just for procedure, when there's an amendment in the package and we don't present it, it doesn't need to be withdrawn. As long as it hasn't been presented, it doesn't exist. Earlier, you had presented it and you needed unanimous consent to withdraw it, but you didn't present it. So now we're moving on to page 44 of the package. It brings us to CPC 15. If CPC 15 is adopted, BQ 14 cannot be moved because the content is too similar. So CPC 15, Mr. Godin, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll see that the Conservative Party is coherent. CPC 15 on Bill C-13, Clause 13, to be amended by adding after line 26 on page 8 the following. Section 33 of the Act is renumbered as subsection 33(1) and is amended by adding the following: in exercising its powers and performing its duties and functions, the Governor and Council shall take into account the minority situation of French in Canada and due to the predominant use of English and the linguistic specificity of Quebec. There you have it, Mr. Chair. I think it would be redundant to repeat the arguments from earlier. Any questions in the room or online? Mr. Serry, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this was a request from the province of Quebec, but I would like to ask our officials a question. When we talk about the Charter, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, this whole issue here, I'd like to know if this is problematic and how it's been presented. Does it go against the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Thank you, Mr. Serry. So here, as mentioned earlier, we are speaking to the regulations by the Governor and Council, and this would force the Governor and Council to take into account the minority situation of French in Canada, and the effect would be, as Carson Quell mentioned earlier, leads to some questions. Does that mean there are fewer services for Anglophones in minority situations because we're taking into account French and its minority situation and unique circumstances? So, for example, if there's a minority language school, as it says here, it would lead to a bilingual office, but it would have to take into consideration that it's a minority situation. So do we automatically do this for bilingual services in an area where there is a minority English language school? It could lead to an asymmetrical approach. And what we said in part 4 is that official language services must be provided in both languages for minority language communities. Mr. Beaulieu. Well, we do want an asymmetrical approach. This amendment was requested by the government of Quebec. I can give you an example that would take into account the francophone minority situation of French. So, for example, rather than having a bilingual signage, we could have signage that emphasizes French. It takes into consideration a minority French community. Perfectly equal bilingualism contributes to the decline of minority language communities, namely French. Mr. Généreux, what you presume that by adding these clauses into the Act would mean that it provides fewer services to Anglophones in Quebec, for example. I'm trying to understand your reasoning with regards to these clauses. Earlier, we spoke about post offices. We don't need bilingual post offices coast to coast. There are areas where there's no demand in the other language. And I can bring the same comparison here. Is that what you're doing? And if yes, why? We have to transport ourselves to tangible scenarios where we're offering services. How would the government respect this new provision? What would the consequence of this be when in the Act we say that we are sensitive to the situation in Quebec? One tangible example would be signage. There's a rule that says that federal offices in Quebec put French first, but the size of the lettering is the same in both languages. Would this new provision lead us to have to change the size of the lettering in French? Maybe this is an overly simplified example, but Ms. Boyer talked about services to the minority English community, the matter of minority language schools. Here, there is no option. There's no way out of it. We have to take it into account, and we'll have to differentiate how we deal with minority communities with regards to services. But currently, sir, in the Acts, in current existing laws, both in Quebec, Bill 101, Law 96, the future act that we're discussing here, would these laws not provide enough specificity? I agree with Mr. Beaulieu. We've talked about it a lot since the study started. Even the idea behind this bill is that French is declining. We don't need to prove this. This has already been proven. And we have to do everything we can to make sure that we can stop this decline and improve French and its presence in Canada and North America, all over the place, especially in minority situations. Now, as for Quebec, as far as I understand, you're talking about signage laws. I think they're very clear in Quebec. Even if we put in this disposition, the point here is to stop the decline of French. It's to become aware of certain elements in Quebec. I'm speaking here to what we experienced last week. I don't want to launch a debate, but Mr. Housefather, Mr. Garneau, raised some legitimate concerns. They were interesting in terms of their point of view. But if we go down to the core of it, if we all agree that French is in peril, we have to include provisions like this one to make sure that we take into account the decline of French to stop its decline. Thank you. The government has committed to promote and protect French. We have reached a consensus on Bill C-13 here. Here we're talking about federal services, not provincial services. So we're talking about post offices, Service Canada offices. In these cases, in Quebec, all federal services are always provided in French. All federal offices in Quebec start first with French services. Here, we're talking about how we can make sure that there is a comparable treatment for the English minority in Quebec. In the current legislation, we treat both minority communities equally. If there's a school, there's a federal office that provides service in the minority language, whether this be in English in Quebec or in French outside of Quebec. Both languages are offered. So this is the basic mode of operation. But at all times, the federal government offers all services in Quebec in French first. And then we also add English service in those areas that warrant it. Mr. Housefather, and then Ms. Ashton. Mr. Housefather, please go ahead. The interpreter regrets, but
Questions for the
does not allow for interpretation.
understanding is, again, this is an asymmetrical treatment that is not the original purpose of C-13, but I wanted to understand the effects. Can you confirm that this change will not add any new French services in Quebec, but could indeed cause English services in Quebec to be reduced, and that nobody would know what the court's interpretation of this clause would actually mean?
So to the first question, yes, you are correct. The second part, I'm not sure on how the courts would interpret it.
Thank you. So basically, this serves only to reduce potentially English services in Quebec. Is all I wanted to clarify. Thank you so much.
Madame Ashton?
Ms. Ashton? The interpreter regrets, but the sound quality coming from the current speaker is not sufficient for interpretation to be provided safely. Interpretation will resume as soon as the sound quality allows.
C'est le cas que le gouverneur en conseil n'est pas déjà tenu de considérer la situation minoritaire du français. Et si c'est vraiment le cas déjà.
Monsieur Newman?
Mr. Newman, as you know, there are certain interpretations that are announced in the Act. With an amendment that was adopted the other day, we agreed that the provisions must be interpreted while taking into account that French is minority in Canada and North America because of the predominant use of English, and that the minority communities in Quebec and the French minority in the rest of Canada and the territories have different needs. So the rules that speak to the application of the Act that target services in French and in English take into account the specificity of those communities. It's already in the Act, and it has been since 1988. The regulation for application takes this into account, the specificity. So to go beyond that, when the goal of Part 4 is to implement a constitutional guarantee that is announced in Clause 20 of the Charter, we find this unnecessary. Thank you. Mr. Beaulieu. This really speaks to the difference in both systems. In the rest of Canada, all services are almost exclusively provided in English. It's only provided in French when there is high demand. Often, when there's high demand, French services are still absent. So people have no choice. They get services in English. And 99% of linguistic transfer happens towards English. In Quebec, it's the only French state in North America. It's the only place where we're able to integrate newcomers to French. So if we interpret it and say institutional bilingualism and the equality of both languages, put yourself in the shoes of a newcomer in Quebec who gets the active offer, etc. It says that we choose English. French is not necessarily the common language, and this is what's happening. We're not able to get them to adopt French. And that's why it's so important that this be in the Act, that federal services be adapted to demonstrate that French is the common language in Quebec, ideally, that it should be at least predominant, but perfect symmetry doesn't work if the goal is to get newcomers to choose French. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Around the table, online, anyone else? Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, following the question from my colleague, Mr. Housefather, I noted that Anglophones in Quebec are saying that their rights are being stifled from this amendment. That's what I understood. But I don't really see how. If I read the reading again, in exercising its powers and performing its duties and functions, the Governor and Council shall take into account. There's no obligation here. Take into account the minority situation of French in Canada due to the predominant use of English and the linguistic specificity of Quebec. This is just a reality. This is a statement of fact. What we're asking for with this amendment is that the Governor and Council takes it into account. What we want here is not to penalize Anglophones in Quebec. The goal here is to protect French in Quebec and to protect it elsewhere. But of course, in this amendment, we're speaking specifically to Quebec. Can you explain to me what you said earlier? You said this would have an impact on the Anglophone minority in Quebec. I don't get it. Thank you for this question. And this is my last chance to clarify what I was saying. So Mr. Housefather asked a question that he said that this would not lead to new services in French, and the only effect would be to possibly reduce the service offering in English. And I agreed. And I'll explain to you why. Here, when it says in the amendment that the Governor and Council shall take into account.
Ça, c'est une obligation.
When you say shall, it's an obligation. So it has to take it into account. It has to demonstrate how it took it into account. So we have to demonstrate that we focus on service offerings in French. So this will penalize or potentially penalize service provision in English. And that's what happens when you take into consideration the language specificity of Quebec. Mr. Beaulieu first.
Compliment.
Yes, go ahead. So you said increasing Francophone services could be harmful to Anglophones in Quebec. Its effect would be to increase services in French, because there's an automatically we have services in French. But we would need to show that we are focusing on the minority situation of Francophones in North America versus Anglophones in Quebec. So there could be an effect, but there could also, on the other hand, be an impact on Francophone minority communities outside of Quebec. No, because we're speaking of the linguistic specificity of Quebec. Mr. Beaulieu, very quickly. My colleague often says there will be fewer rights for Anglophones in Quebec, but it's as though you want that Quebecers be able to live entirely in English without having to speak any French. Mr. Beaulieu, we're speaking of the amendment. I don't want you to presume what a colleague has said when it hasn't been said. So the goal of this amendment is to ensure that the focus is on French as the language of Quebec and to support the inclusion of immigrants in Quebec and ensure that they speak French. Mr. Chair, in this committee, we often have very divergent opinions. Mr. Beaulieu, I agree. I understand we want French to be the main language. We want French to grow, of course. And I understand that Mr. Housefather is also defending his community. I don't think it's that we need to put more focus on one language or another. We need to think about the context. The goal is that we take into account the context and that the wording is important in what we're demonstrating. Ms. Boyer, you're speaking in the conditional sense. If you tell me this is the case, there will be consequences, then I would say, okay, let's watch out for this. But if we need to ensure that we're taking into account a certain context with the governor and council, as is mentioned here, there's no obligation to ensure that we have studied the potential demand, because it's the government of Quebec that's requesting that this element be spoken of in the bill. Of course, again, we're not legislative clerks. We're trying to offer the highest possible representation of demand in Quebec. Now, I would ask now if we could get an explanation as to why this amendment, and I have a lot of respect for Mr. Housefather and that he advocates for the Anglophone community in Quebec. So much respect, but beyond this, our goal is not to diminish one group compared to another. If that's what's being done, I feel that you're interpreting this in a certain way because you're speaking in the conditional sense. If there had been an analysis of this, then I would agree, but I don't think that this is what I've seen. Mr. Quill, thank you for the question, and I think I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Newman, to add to this. I'm not a legislative clerk. I can't specify what this means to take into account, but in our opinion, that's an obligation. If we look at Section 4, it's finding the difference between the Francophone minority communities and Anglophone minority communities in terms of service provision. That may mean that I spoke with the school and maybe the scope, the distance from them to the federal office is different, and then we might look at opening hours and when service is available in each language, or are we offering bilingual service 24/7? So we're trying to take into account all this context, depending on where we are in Quebec, outside of Quebec. With this provision, what we have to do is differentiate between treatment in Quebec for Anglophone communities and how we're treating francophones outside of Quebec. Sorry, it's 10:45, and so we have other things to do on the Hill, so we need to adjourn. Mr. Beaulieu, inaudible. Monsieur Drouin, I'm sorry, I need to adjourn. With Ms. Ashton and the Deputy Chair, I think we can discuss the time that we lost because of technical problems. Thank you.
Thank you.